You're listening to the Balanced Educator Podcast, episode number 79. Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from EduCalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life. Hello and welcome to the Balanced Educator Podcast. Do you ever have the problem where you're halfway through the school year and you're like, why don't my students know this routine that we do every day, multiple times a day? Have you ever come across this issue?
If a teacher says no to this, I'm going to be like, wow, that is very impressive.
Well, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about instilling these habits in our students. But before we get onto this topic, we have to share with you the amazing Canadian ethical clothing brand, Free Label. These items of clothing that are made ethically in Canada are so versatile. They fit so well together. They just make any outfit awesome.
Yes, and I love Free Label for traveling because I can pack my carry-on suitcase and put my Free Label pieces in there and know that they all go together. And also if I have any pieces that I'm bringing that aren't Free Label, all my Free Label clothing goes with everything because they're so versatile. You can wear them in many different ways. And also they're versatile in the locations that you can wear them. Like you can dress them down, you can dress them up. So it's just so perfect to travel with.
They are currently launching their fall collection. The colors are beautiful. The pieces are beautiful. You have to check them out.
Yes. Go to educalm.com/free label. That's educalm.com/FREELABEL.
All right, let's dive into this topic of instilling habits in our students. Not an easy task.
Yes. Now, in the 5-part series that we had on avoiding teacher burnout before this episode, we talked about habits, how habits are formed, so that once we understand how habits are formed, we can hack that, use that to our advantage, and make it easier to form new habits. Now, why is it that we want our students to have specific habits? What's the goal here?
The goal is to, I feel like, conserve energy in the sense of not having to tell them all day long where things need to be put, or how things need to be organized or where they need to be when they need to be there. And instead, we can focus on what's important, which is 1, social emotional learning, and 2, academics.
Absolutely. We get so many questions from teachers about creating smooth transitions in the classroom. Transitions are absolutely an area that is really difficult when it comes to the classroom management.
Yeah. Myself included. It's always been kind of a challenge for me.
Exactly. So if we can make really instilled habits into our students, then it just makes those transitions so much smoother and we can be a lot more hands-off in those transitions as well. So let's talk a little bit about the brain real quick to remember why habits are important. Why does our brain even create habits? Our brain is always trying to conserve energy. It's trying to not do more work than it needs to. So the second that our brain sees that something is reoccurring and that it's beneficial to us, it decides to make that an automatic habit, meaning it is no longer taking conscious effort to do the action than how we used to. So for example, very easy example to understand is when you're driving to work the very first time on your very first day of the job, you really have to pay attention to where you're going. Now, once you've driven that same route several times, all of a sudden you can get home and not even remember how you got there because your body literally has unconsciously driven you all the way home without your thinking mind having to pay attention and say, oh, turn here, turn that. there. So why is that beneficial to us? Well, when our body just plays out the actions that have become habitual, our mind is free to do other things, think of other things, do other things. So our brain is always looking for repetition and making those repetitive actions an unconscious habit. So if we can make these habits unconscious for our students, that's going to make things so much easier, because let's face it, being a student is tough. Like, you know, when you do a PD session and you're learning all day and you realize, wow, sitting still and learning all day is really hard.
Yeah, I'm tired, you're thinking.
Just exhausted by the end of the day. Well, it's because when our brain is having to think constantly and take in lots of new information, it gets exhausted, it gets tired, it uses a ton of our body's energy. So for our students, we want them to learn new things. So if we can allow their brain to use all of its energy when they're learning the new thing from the lesson and conserve its energy when it's going through the motions of the classroom routines, then that's beneficial to them. It makes learning easier. All right, so let's talk about the habit loop again. We'll review it. If you want more details about how habits are created and this habit loop specifically, go back to our episode called Avoid Teacher Burnout, How to Create Good Habits That Will Last Throughout the School Year. And that was part 1 of our 5-part series. So the habit loop is in 4 steps. First, it's the cue. So the cue is what tells the brain that it's time to play out a program. The craving is next, and that's our desire, our motivation to do something, our motivation to move from one state to the next. Then it's the response. So the response is actually the action that we take to satisfy the craving, to satisfy that motivation that we had to move from one state to the other. And the 4th step is the reward. So that is the emotion that we feel, or the benefit that we get from having done that action, having done that response. So we have cue, craving, response, reward. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Cue, craving, response, reward.
So if we can keep this cue, craving, response, reward loop in mind as we are teaching our students the routines and procedures of our classroom, we can make sure that we're presenting it in a way and doing it in a way that is going to actually work with their brain instead of working against their brain. So remember too that repetition is so important.
Repetition, 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 repetition.
There's a reason that in the past 6 episodes, we've been saying cue, craving, response, reward. Cue, craving, response, reward. We've repeated it over and over so that it sinks into your brain. So repetition means doing the habit, the routine, over and over and over, but in the same way.
And in this case, it means instructing it.
Yes, exactly.
Over and over and over, the same way.
Yeah. Because if we're doing our routines differently every time, then our students' brains aren't recognizing repetition. So their brain isn't creating a program for that action, for that habit loop. So if your morning routine, sometimes they put their jackets away first and then they bring their bag to the desk, and other times they bring their bag to the desk first and then the jacket. If you aren't very clear and really on them, to be honest, in the beginning to do the routine in the same way every time, then their brain isn't going to create that habitual unconscious action.
So can we make an example out of this?
Yes.
I would like to talk about end of day transition, because that's always a tough one for me.
Sounds good. Okay. So first things first, you have to decide what the routine is going to be, and it has to be very clear for you so that you can communicate it very clearly. That means if there's more than one step to the transition at the end of the day, then you have to decide exactly what order those steps go in every day.
And less steps is better.
Absolutely.
I feel like before this episode, we were talking about, okay, how can we make each transition even more simple? a great question to ask ourselves.
Yeah. Can I simplify this? Can we do it in less steps?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if we're creating our end of day routine, Josiane, in your classroom, what would you like the end of day routine to be?
Usually what I've been doing is that they write in their agenda, then they put their chair away, and then they wait for me to let them know they're good to go, and then they go in the hallway. Their lockers are in the hallway, and they get ready out in the locker to go, or not in the locker. They get ready inside their lockers, at their lockers, and then they come back to class and wait to leave.
Right.
But already, as I'm talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't even be doing agenda at that time of the day. That's too many steps.
That's a really good way to take out a
So
step.
instead, I'm thinking we could do another transition right after the last recess where students come in from recess, they write in their agenda right away, then that step is done. So let's just look at the putting the chair away and then going to the locker to get ready and then waiting in line for the end of the day.
Sounds good.
Or for the bell to ring.
So we have 3 steps in this routine. So we could easily break this up into the cue, craving, response, reward for each of the steps. Because really, the end of step 1 is going to be the cue for step 2.
That's right.
Right? So let's kind of look at it as this 3-step process and then break it down as we go. So step 1, we have to think of the cue. What is going to be the cue that tells your students now is the time to commence end of day routine?
Commence end of day. The first thing for me that comes to mind is to have a visual poster that's really bright somewhere where the list of the things, those 3 things will be.
Perfect. So I was just going to say the cue has to be obvious, and writing it somewhere that it is visual to your students is going to be so important.
That, and then also obviously I will say it out loud, but referring to the poster always.
Yeah. I subbed in a class this year that had they had their end of day routine down pat. I was so impressed. And the teacher would just, at the end of the day, would say out loud, end of day routine. And then she would put a 3-minute timer on the board.
A timer. That's a great idea.
So, and the second that end of day routine was said, that was the cue that now it's time to start end of day routine. So our cue, we have to make it obvious. Either it's something that we're saying or something that we're showing. If we can do it in several ways, if there's a visual and an audio cue at the exact same time, that would be ideal. So the cue is obvious. Then next we have the craving. So we have to do something that makes our students want to move from where they are to where you want them to go. There has to be motivation here. So we have to make this step attractive. It has to be something that's appealing to them. Whether it's something that we can easily make an intrinsic motivation where they're self-motivated to do it just because they're interested in the outcome, or if we have to motivate them from an extrinsic way, which in my opinion, I don't think there's anything wrong with having extrinsic motivation where we're congratulating them or encouraging them or making it fun.
Yeah, putting music on maybe at the end of the day but yeah, I think this is a situation a little bit where because you have whatever, maybe 25 different personalities in your classroom, this make it attractive part is going to be a little bit different for the different students, right? It's kind of a fair is not equal situation.
Yes.
Some kids, you may need a reward system. Some kids, just the tap on the shoulder is great. Some kids just like to have a clean space. So they're just happy that everything is organized. So kind of just getting to know your students and then thinking of what will work best to make it attractive.
Yes. One thing that worked really well for me this past year was my students were very motivated by countdowns. So yeah, that 3-minute
It's
timer.
like a competition almost.
Yes, they were very competitive. So like really playing to that competitive side of them really worked to motivate them because that made it fun and exciting for them. So the next step is the response. So the response is the actual action that they're taking. So here it's really important that we make it easy and we make it clear. They know exactly what it is they have to do. And it's not something that, like we said, is in too many steps that they forget what needs to get done and then they get distracted. So a couple ways that we can make it really easy would be one step at a time. So the fact that we have it written on the board can really help them.
Or even dial that back, even in September, you actually as a class do it one thing at a time. So teacher gives instruction for the first step. Everybody does the first step. Everyone stops. Teacher does instruction for step 2. Everybody does it, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Which
like
can
explicitly teaching each step.
Yeah. Which can feel so tedious at the beginning of the year and like almost like a waste of time, but you gain that time back.
You'll thank yourself later.
Exactly. Because once this becomes an automatic habit and you no longer have to manage these transitions, then life is just easier for everyone. So, teaching one step at a time, making it as simple as possible. Like you said, one thing at a time, checklists, or even doing like a divide and conquer thing. So in my classroom this past year, it really worked well for us for end of day cleanup that each person had their one job. Because if I said, okay, first you clean your desk, then you clean the floor, then you do this and do that, it was too much. So if just everyone was in charge, or one person was in charge of wiping down all the desks, one person was in charge of cleaning the floor, they had their one job, that made it so much more simple. And they just got into the routine of, okay, now it's time to do my class job. And it made it a lot more simple and work a lot better.
And they're proud of the work that they do.
That was another thing. There was a sense of motivation there because there was a sense of pride of having done their job. And I even had one student that it was their job to check that everyone else had done their job.
Perfect.
So it was up to them to put a check mark or an X if that person had done a good job.
Idea.
And that actually worked really well. I wasn't sure if it was going to work well. I experimented with it to see if it was like going to cause conflict or not. And it actually worked really well.
That's great.
So it was nice.
I did something a little bit differently with the jobs. What I would do is have 2 people a week that were in charge of everything. And part of their job was that at the end of the day, they were the ones who had to go around and make sure all the chairs were put away. Nothing was on the floor that shouldn't be there. So it was like a 1-week thing, which seemed to also work pretty well. But it does require very explicit teaching. Mm-hmm. Like what does the job look like when you're doing it, right? So I had to use the previous week's students to model for the new students, especially at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. But that's especially in grade 5, that's such a good skill to be teaching them, although it took a little bit more hands-on teaching for you to teach them all the steps that they had to go through. What a great sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility and leadership that they had to have. So great learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Awesome. So then finally, the 4th step is the rewards. We had the cue, the craving, the response. Now we're at the reward. And the rule here is make it satisfying. Make it something that once they have completed the action, they feel a sense of pride or they feel a sense of excitement or joy or fun or something that leaves them that where their brain is saying, hey, this is good. Right? This is something that I like. Now, this can definitely take a little bit of experimentation to figure out what's going to work with your students. And you might have kind of a blanket reward system, whether it's an actual physical reward system or just a good job, guys, or whatever it is.
Yeah, or emailing the parents.
Yeah.
Is always a good one to tell them to tell them that they did something good.
Yeah. High fives. High fives go a long way.
High fives. That's so true. Ooh, and we had the idea that like if it's like end of day classroom transition it's like the first person who's ready gets to leave first kind of thing. And even like in grade 5 and 6, which is what I was teaching last year, like that stuff like that works.
Yeah. Plays to their competitive side. And also, end of day transition, they're ready to go home at the end of the day, right? So they're motivated.
Preteens.
Yeah. They're motivated to get ready so that they can go home. Just something that gives them a sense of reward so that their brain says, okay, this habit loop is good for me. This is a positive outcome.
I think that this one is more work for us as teachers than it is for them, because we have to remember as the teacher to notice the good in our students. Like that's not always easy.
Yeah.
When you have a tough day or whatever. So training our own brains as the teacher to catch them when they're being awesome.
Yes.
And letting them know.
Yeah. Definitely something to practice making a habit.
That's right.
So when teaching our students routines for the classroom, let's work with how the brain creates habits instead of against it by making sure that we're keeping things super consistent. Repetition is so key.
So key.
Keeping the cue consistent, the craving, the response, and the reward all consistent so that as you repeat this every day, your students' brains recognize the routine and the brain wants to make it a habit.
Another thing that's important is the pre-teaching aspect. Ooh, struggling to talk now. The explicit teaching of the habit over and over and over again, and not assuming that our students get it.
So your exit ticket for today is to actually sit down and write out cue, craving, response, reward for your end of day transition that you'd like to teach your students and make a habit, and actually map it out so that you have a plan for how you're going to do this. Because if it's clear in your mind, you'll be able to repeat it every day the same way so that it's clear for your students as well. And this is just going to make your life easier.
Awesome.
So next week, we are having an interview with Caitlin from EB Academics, and she is going to be teaching her framework for lesson planning and how planning your lessons out using her framework is going to simplify your life, bring more calm and balance in your classroom, in your personal life, and help you to spend less time in the classroom and more time on your life. We are excited to see you back here next week.
Have a great week.
Worry, stress, and anxiety are a reality in today's schools. When students are distracted, their brains aren't ready for learning. Getting them to calm down and focus can feel impossible. Don't feel helpless, frustrated, or overwhelmed any longer. Get EduCalm Classroom, our online mindfulness program that's transforming classrooms and improving student wellness and learning. With EduCalm Classroom, students and teachers learn concrete strategies and common vocabulary to manage emotions and behaviors. They both leave the classroom better equipped to overcome life's challenges. In your EduCalm Classroom membership, you'll get a full year of ready-to-use audio, video, and printable mindfulness lessons for the classroom, plus access to a caring and supportive community of like-minded teachers. Try EduCalm Classroom for free by going to www.educalm.com. EduCalm is spelled EduCalme. Thrive in a calm learning atmosphere.